Let this be the introduction to a series I'll call The Demolition of Mormon Apologetics, Book of Mormon Challenge, and mind control techniques. So it's been a little bit eventful lately with all the attacks on me personally and on the Dodger Game channel by mostly wannabe Mormon apologists. And some really great information that Hugh Nibley would be just turning in his grave. I'm pretty sure he's in the vast beyond at this point. And oh man, really good stuff that I've come upon here. Thankfully, to some of this that's been going on, and I had a viewer named Scott who sent me a link that got me to see this guy, and he has a channel called Raw Men, like Aron Ra, and he interviewed in this video right here that I'm just taking a picture from here. He's articulating some things having to do with zoology and whole Noah's Ark fable. Which is a little easier if you just look at history and see that the people survived anyway, they weren't washed away. I like to go the simple route usually, but this guy's got some nice articulating on real science having to do with animal survival, and transportation. It's some questions that I had a long time ago when I thought, really? The three-toed sloth walked to Central America from Mount Ararat? Really? If you know what their lifestyle's like, if you ever seen one, you'd realize that wouldn't happen. But this guy did an interview of a fellow who's just come out with a book called Book of Mormon, Book of Lies, and wow, I haven't even seen the book other than the book cover, but he did an interview with the fellow, and they have found a lot of material. You think View of the Hebrews and the Book of Napoleon and the late war are good sources for Book of Mormon content. Well, this guy's actually he's got a lot more, and it's not the fellow here. This guy actually interviewed him on his channel, but and what they've been able to correlate through probably computer programs and so forth, showing throughout the text of the Book of Mormon, throughout the book, just correlating the same way it was done, like in the New Testament, where you've got, a scene with Jesus, and a lot of these places are, they're places where the Jews were having these various battles with the Romans and so forth. If you understand anything about how the New Testament fables were put together, they correlate to Jewish history, and that's they were written into the actual historical context of a lot of the Jewish battles with the Romans, and you'll find Jesus here at the same, all these anyway. If you don't know anything about that, there's good information on that. So there are these veiled ways of writing history into things, and this guy shows what Joseph Smith did by taking out of various books, but especially through certain ones. Was it the Travels of Marco Polo or and some other things that compiled a bunch of travel, information. It's got Arabian Peninsula stuff. It's got, it's from what little I've been able to see, it's really interesting. Taking stories and then just changing the names a little bit out of Conquest of Mexico and all sorts of materials that were used to compile. They just correlate. It's like, all right, you go 66% into this book and you'll find the exact same story with different names. You know, as if you go 66% into the Book of Mormon, for instance. And it's over and over and over again. Just incredible. And what we find is this guy says, you know, so far he's being like ignored or something, even though they've got, you know, tremendous information here, and we look at the way people are conditioned in the LDS church and in the other, you know, churches that use the same kind of mind control techniques to reject anything that could possibly harm your faith. It's got to be Satan, you know, and we find when we get these people, if you get into a conversation with them, most of them, their first tactic is to attack, you know, find something wrong or do an attack on character assassination. It's what Hugh Nibley did, it's what Dan Peterson does, it's what Scott Gordon does, and you know, fair Mormon guys, they attack the character, which is what Joseph Smith did. You know, attacking people's characters, like attacking Joseph Jackson, for instance. Or he always attacked the characters of women who refused his advances. You know, they were, you know, they were labeled as immoral. You know, said they were having an affair with so and so or whatever, and he'd get lots of the girls in his spiritual wife system to sign an affidavit or something, or people would come forth, all these false witnesses, and say, "Yep, she's bad," because hey, it works. You know, we've got examples of him actually having all these people sign something that said he was not involved with other women. He had no kind of plural activities going on, concubinage at all. And a lot of them were sleeping with him, you know. So, I mean, what? You know, some of the girls in the Relief Society and the Relief Society presidency with Emma, behind Emma's back, were, you know, involved with her husband. So, I actually ran into another one of these characters on another venue last evening, I believe it was. And this guy was promoting, first he starts promoting, you know, Hugh Nibley bashing Fawn Brody, you know, with the that's not history, which I read a long time ago, where he, you know, he bashes Fawn Brody and tries to discredit her so that you know, if he can find one thing that's questionable in all of, you know, no man knows my history, as far as the type of standards that maybe historians might use to establish something as a credible assertion. You know, he might find one weak point, or then he'll say, oh, she's a lesbian or something, and then, oh, so we shouldn't, you know, we shouldn't believe anything that she says. It's all destroyed. You know, and so this guy's promoting this, and this guy's promoting himself too. What's his name? Leo Wienergard, Wienergar. I don't know. Maybe it's a shortening of Wienergard. He's the original Sheath or something. I don't know. I think of Anthony Weiner for some reason. This guy was featured on a video done, you know, down under in Australia. He's not in Australia, but, you know, they did it, you know, using Skype or something, where there were two LDS guys and then one LDS, you know, ex-LDS, former return missionary, you know, he's a return missionary, that sort of thing. He'd done his historical research, and he decided he doesn't believe, you know, he doesn't even believe he doesn't believe in anything in the spiritual world. He doesn't believe Mormonism is true, obviously, because he's done their historical research. He sees all the contradictions, the lies, the whitewash history, and the changing doctrines and the deception practiced by the brethren. And then he's got these other two guys, and, you know, they got one that's kind of in the middle, I guess. Says he's going on a mission, and I'd like to review more of what he had to say. He seemed like a real bright young fellow. His name was Jackson with an X, not a CK. And then there's this guy, Leo, and I thought, you know, I'm not going to like this guy if I ever run into him. The other two fellows actually commented on the video that I did that discussed some of what they had to say, and a lot of things about spiritual experiences and also experiences that are perceived as spiritual which may or may not be, ones that fall into the category of, they possibly could be explained away by emotional or psychological stimuli. But there are many that are not in that category. And so these fellows probably both feel that stayed in the church that they have had those types of experiences. And Leo just seems to, blatantly ignore or override or appears dishonest to me, like many of the church apologists appear to be. They appear to actually realize that they're deceiving people. They don't try to put it all on the table and say, okay, let's examine this stuff. No, they are actually very dishonest. And he appears to be like one of those. The Jackson fellow did not appear to be that way at all from what little I saw of what he had to say. He said things like, I used to look at Fair Mormon and then, I'd be okay with things, and that doesn't get it anymore. Meaning a lot of us have put things on the shelf and then just said, oh, okay, there was a response from, the church or something, closely associated with the church from BYU, Farms or something, and they've got something to say to make it okay that, there are no Lamanites, or that all we can find is people from Siberia in the DNA. They've got some convoluted stuff here that makes it sound like it's so complicated that the only thing you can do is pray about it. That's always the way that they lead us in the church and in the church essays. So when you get to fact, so this guy, then he starts, so I made a response and I said, actually, Nibley, Peterson, Gordon, those guys, and I said, I put a link to Flackerman's video on Tactics of a Mormon Apologist. I used a little clip in that in my introduction to, YouTube pro-truth, anti-Mormonism people recently. So I just put the link to Flackerman's video because he destroys Scott Gordon's credibility, because he just shows Scott lying and proving it time after time after time when Scott's presenting false evidence, trying to discredit people that he calls anti-Mormons or critics. And as we look at the details, we find out he's using false evidence. And Flackerman proves that. So I put that up there. And, same thing I did like with my First Vision videos, and we find them using fake evidence on LDS.org to support Joseph Smith. So then this guy puts out something about, what is it, Sheldon Gee or something, on the Book of Abraham, trying to tell us that that's, something. I said, so I threw in, I put here, I've done some videos, and here's a link to, my playlist regarding Book of Abraham videos that I've done on the Dodger Game channel. So this guy, he pipes up and says something to me, and he says, but what are your credentials? And I said, well, nothing you'd be interested in. I can read English, and I'm, I'm into being honest and truthful, and I've done some reading. And I don't know who he was. He seemed to insist that I needed to be an Egyptologist in order to talk to him. I don't think I really needed to talk to him. I was putting things up there for other people. Generally, I didn't feel he'd have an honest bone in his body. But, he's one of these guys that has to get the last word. So, boy, oh boy. So, he just wanted to attack my ability as not being an Egyptologist and to have any sort of clue about the Book of Abraham. So I shared some details, about the fallacies in the Book of Abraham, including the fact that we've got, just straight up anachronisms and wrong information printed and right there in English, and there's nothing to do with Egypt in the text. Joseph Smith didn't translate Egyptian, That's been proven. All these Egyptologists have said that, and said that the characters, of course, were completely, mistranslated. Everything Joseph Smith, his Egyptian alphabet, everything he did was totally fake, right? So this guy just wanted to So I just said, why are we calling Abram Abraham? That's an anachronism right there, pal. You know, what's that about? So he starts showing cartoon figures. He's like, oh, your credentials are no good. I'm not gonna talk to you. Well, did you post this so only people with, an Egyptology degree were going to respond? I said, the last I checked, the scriptures say, woe unto the learned that think they are wise and all this stuff, that this is, for the simple to be able to understand, but you seem to have a problem with that. And I can read English, and, it's got lots of false information in it, in the material that we actually have. So, this guy starts he'll put anything from The Simpsons or whatever, and I'm like, here's me. This is, so I choose to share, so I said, what's your problem with this, I choose to share images that perhaps you'll understand, like this one, which looks like what you're doing regarding the Book of Abraham. And he did several of these, and I said, just answer the question, you don't need to know Egyptology. And by the way, your God, there, according to Joseph Smith, the guy that the Egyptologists say is Pharaoh, your prophet, Joseph Smith, says the guy sitting there, with his no pants on and in a state of obvious sexual stimulation, Joseph Smith says he's talking to Abraham and the Holy Ghost about the grand key words of the priesthood when he's sitting there. It's like, Pee Wee Herman just got caught in the movies doing something he shouldn't have been. And he's got his no pants on, It's obscene. It's hieroglyphic pornography. And it's in the scriptures, the LDS canon of scripture, in the Pearl of Great Price. Sure, the figure's upside down, and, in that facsimile number 2, it's figure 7. It's complete obscenity. And I said, you tell me, explain that to me, Leo Wienegar. Explain to me what your God is doing, giving a personal priesthood interview with his shorts off. Looks like he, just was in the act of something. I mean, give me a break. You explain it. It says, that's childish, you're being... It's childish. No, it's your scriptures. Your prophet said, "This is God. This is God sitting there with his equipment package exposed in full obelisk form, full excitement, talking to 2 males. Okay, that's beyond weird, dude. Okay, you explain it." You explain why Abram is Abraham. You explain why, the Catholic Invention of Jehovah is in the book that's supposed to be from 2000 BC. And what does an Egyptologist have to do with a book that the Book of the Apologists and the church, sponsored essays already admit had nothing to do with the papyrus? They just say Joseph Smith got inspired somehow reading this completely unrelated Egyptian stuff that he couldn't read. Yeah. So, this is the kind of thing we see. When facts are a problem, we turn to this. All he could do was, he did one after another of these, and I go, dude, just answer a question. Deal with some fact. And he's like, it's unbelievable. Your comments remind me of this. And what is it? Anti-presence, and it's just one thing after another. So, and this is the guy that's featured on the video, about trying to represent Mormonism. What a joke. But he thinks he's up and coming now. He's got,
Great. Any comments, Leo, from your side while we wrap up?
I have no confirmation bias.
Here. This is... much anger I sense in you. They can't deal with fact.
Great. Any comments, Leo, from your side while we wrap up?
I have no confirmation bias.
And apologetics seems to be this phenomenon of motivated reasoning. It seems whatever argument, however remotely reasonable, can defend our point of view, we will make that argument. And so, as I said, the reason I lost my belief in the LDS Church was extensive analysis of apologetics, to the point where I started to see that the arguments don't cohere, that they themselves contradict each other, or that the treatment of evidence is not even-handed. So when a third or fourth hand account supports belief in Mormonism, it's right there on the fair Mormon side. But when a first-hand account contradicts it, when 7 first-hand accounts say Zelf, the skeleton, we're talking about Mesoamerica, right? When 7 or 8 first-hand accounts, or second-hand accounts, watching Joseph Smith, all say almost exactly the same thing, that is dwelt on. So my conclusion is, I don't think apologetics deals with evidence in a fair, objective, balanced manner. And I think you can find that not just by looking at LDS apologetics, but by looking at others. You have to look at Islamic apologetics, as I said, Christian apologetics, etc. So what are your responses to this line of reasoning, this challenge?
Well, I'll just say a few things. I'm aware of this, and I agree with what you're saying. Just that naturally we have the potential for confirmation bias, and what was the term you used?
Motivated reasoning.
Motivated reasoning, yeah. That definitely makes sense. And I've heard before individuals in the church say regarding individuals who leave the church, oh, well, they left just because they wanted to leave, or
they wanted to sin, they're lazy, yeah.
not even that too, but just like if an individual like yourself, let's say, dives into critical and apologetic materials and makes their conclusion that they need to leave, and that's what they conclude, people will be like, oh, well, that's just what they wanted to to conclude in the first place. They started with that motivation. It goes both ways. Right,
but to honestly say this, I speak for myself and many others who've left. Many of us wanted nothing more but the church to be true. Actually,
don't mistake me in saying that.
I know you know that
you're applying a double standard by any means. I was using that to show that Latter-day Saints themselves apply a double standard. Because by the same token, if an individual decides to stay, they're not going to say, well, you're staying just because you want to stay, So I will say we all suffer from the disease of confirmation bias and of wanting certain things, and our reasoning is impacted by that. And I'll be the first one to say that I'm guilty of this, and I've caught myself in many ways. I don't know a person who hasn't. You described sources that are deemed friendly or argumentative. I've entered conversations or debates where I have my blinders on, or I have my guard up, and several years ago the first thing I would do is just be like, okay, there's a criticism, but let's see what Fair Mormon has to say, because they must be right, and once I would just read what they say, oh, okay, they have an answer. That answer then must be right, and I was comfortable with that, and that appeased me for the moment. That doesn't cut it anymore, but we just need to be cognizant of that. We need to try and avoid that whenever we can by looking at double standards on both sides. I will say that there are apologetic arguments made in defense of Mormonism that I wouldn't use myself, because I feel that they employ a double standard, and I hate when people that I'm arguing against do the same thing. So you just you gotta take it both ways.
That's great. That's very honest. Thank you. Great. Any comments, Leo, from your side while we wrap up?
I have no confirmation bias.
Me neither. Isn't that great? Yeah, no,
it's all true. It's all true. I know it is. No, I mean, that's guys. I hear you. Like, growing up in the church, I have no excuse. I mean, I just, I can't prove it to you guys or to anybody that I'm without confirmation bias for sure. So, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like God is real and he loves everybody, he's going to try to get everybody to believe.
Well, either it happened or it didn't. Either Joseph saw God or he didn't. The facts don't support that he did at all. The history with his family, the testimonies of his family and the apostles and the known history don't support the first vision. The Book of Mormon, sorry, it's factually proven to be a 19th century document. Here's another great example of this double standard business here. We got a Sue Beam, if I'm saying your name right. She's recently come on the channel and made some really astute remarks here, and she notices here. Probably help if I what's being said here on Fair Mormon. This has to do with use of antidepressants. We also saw that that between ages 10 and 17, the number one cause of death in Utah is suicide. So here she's looking at quoting out of Fair Mormon, trying to change the way we look at things here. It says that while Utah does have the highest rate of antidepressant use in the United States, there's no evidence that this is because of the stress from the LDS lifestyle or culture. No, of course not. Right? And so that's right off of Fair Mormon. She gives us the link there. And what we see is them trying to twist things to, it's got nothing to do with Mormonism, they say, right? But if we look at what did they say in Marvelous Work on a Wonder? Oh, Mormons are healthier, wealthier, and wiser, because we've got these statistics that, because we don't have so much cancer and so forth. But, when the facts are not convenient, when they show the correlation, they got double or triple the antidepressant use of, states like California or New York or something they go through here. And then they just try to make it sound like, well, it doesn't have anything to do with the church. No, it's just some other strange coincidence. They say, it's not that high in Idaho or Arizona, and they're, big Mormon states. Well, instead of being like 55 to 70% LDS, you got like 19 to 26 in Idaho and 5% in Arizona. 5%, so you got, 10, 11, 12 times, the percentage in Utah that you do in Arizona. So, fake evidence, once again, just like we've shown it so many other times. Just like, Scott Gordon was doing and Flackerman busted him giving fake evidence. You look at the details, find that their evidence that they try to use doesn't actually support their claims in many, many cases. Mormon Apologetics, dishonesty at its best. The statistics here. And here, we're going to talk to Mormon states. Utah, it says 55, Wikipedia's got them at 70. Idaho 19, Wyoming 9, Arizona 5, Alaska 5. And then of course, when we got the top suicide rates total, Utah's third, and it's only beat out by Alaska and Montana. 2 of the other top 10 Mormon states. No, it doesn't have anything to do with Mormonism. Not at all. But this guy is dealing with some really interesting stuff, and so here's the book, and I'm gonna get into more of this information. The Book of Mormon, Book of Lies, because Hugh Nibley gave us this this false premise that in order to reject the Book of Mormon, we had to prove how Joseph Smith came up with it. And, people have put out various information for years of things that looked like they were possible sources, at least for part of it. But it's a false premise. All we got to do is show that it's got false information. If it comes from Jesus and he's supposed to be all knowledgeable and truthful and unchanging, all we got to do is show him violating his own rules, which we've done over and over and over again in some of the videos there. Like the 33 things on the shelf, or the redo of that, what was it, awesome anti-Mormonism speaks out, or whatever it was. But this guy actually shows so much correlation with a variety of books, but some of them were like done as like compilation or something. And oh, the way it correlates, right, you know, right in the same portion of the book. In other words, the Marco Polo thing's like 700 some pages, and the Book of Mormon's like 500 some. So they do it on a percentage basis, and you'll just find it. Like almost all the time, you'll find the same stories, and the names are just slightly different, which helps out with the narrative in the Book of Mormon. It helps create a narrative. So super interesting. I'm going to get more into that shortly, and yeah, this is some interesting stuff. It really is some interesting stuff. What's his last name? Sheets. So we're going to take a good look at what this guy's got to say, because I think it'll also have issues with Nahum. But then again, if we believe that Joseph Smith was channeling the whole time, then he could channel anything. But he didn't have to be channeling. I think they just put that in there, and basically he's got a confession from, or he shows how, you know, a book that Joseph's mother was writing was essentially looked like a confession that she knew that their whole thing was a fraud, and you know, like the Tree of Life vision, and he actually found the sourcing for that. You know, we know that Lucy Mack said her husband or father, you know, somebody had that same vision that Joseph Smith actually has there in the Book of Mormon, but we actually found the sourcing for that, where she just basically showed it was copied. So yeah, there was something like 1811. So every time that they tell us, oh, you know, the word of wisdom was beyond its time, it was divine inspiration, nobody was into those things, and you're saying, oh yeah, find out the Temperance Society was saying the same things. Well, same thing with this. So many things that, you know, that have been promoted as, oh, Joseph Smith, he couldn't have known these things. They even show Joseph Smith doing that with various things where he actually had the materials, but was making it look like he's, you know, some holy prophet by writing things in and then saying, see, look, no one knew about this, but he actually had the materials. So no, it probably didn't come from a rock, actually, after all. Talk to you later, and have a great day. Like, subscribe, all that stuff.